Feel better now. All right, friends, it's time for my serious talk. I always have one somewhere. So I will be speaking of some difficult things and asking us to rise to the challenge of what that will mean. Now, first I will use Master DK's words because we do tend to listen to him. We are, I thought, shall I do like Lawson and just talk? Just say here, without preparing, except, in my mind, just let whatever comes out, come out. I'll wait till the second half of the talk to do that. Or should I prepare? And then, it rather troubled me, what shall I speak about this morning? The title of the talk is The Prince of Peace and the Final War. And you see why I've chosen that. And of course, that's a very provocative statement because it's all based on deep occultism, and the world at large is not going to acknowledge the reality of this type of thought, which anticipates possibilities that many of us would not like to think about. How it is, people do go into denial quite often, and they choose not to think about that which is radically unpleasant. Appalling, in fact. But I'm going to deal with these appalling issues this morning. And then, of course, come to the service and you'll be able to get rid of it, So anyway, a few things by DK in his April-May address of 1946. And this will tie in the beginning with the Jewish problem that Philip and the Methuselah group here, Christina and Uta have helped us with so much. So DK is talking about things that have to be done in our world. And a lot of us are familiar with these things because we have read these things. But I would like them to be on the front burner of our consciousness if they can be. He says that the Jews should be rid of fear is of major importance. And we can see why, because of that incredibly defensive consciousness, the survival is always at stake. That they should know and recognize the Christ as the Messiah, and therefore find for themselves that the religion they follow is destructive of many of the finer values, is likewise of major importance. Obviously, a hue and cry will be raised up. Don't forget that DK was the straight talker here. He had a lot of first rate in his nature on a triadal level, and everybody complains against Alice Bailey that she rewrote him somehow. Every time something unpleasant comes up, it was Alice Bailey, which is ridiculous, because she would have been kicked out immediately. He would have dismissed her. He never would have worked with her if she had not taken down what he said and what he intended. So he said this, okay? Is likewise of major importance that Orthodox Judaism, along with all the other faiths, let's not forget that, should realize that there is no desire to make them Christian in the ordinary sense of the term, but that they should all move towards some loving synthesis and eliminate their mutual antagonisms and rivalries is equally urgent, and this statement includes the Christian faiths as well. So when people read this, they just see Orthodox Judaism. They don't see all the rest of this. It's all these faiths that have to somehow move towards a loving synthesis and realize that nobody's trying to force them to be orthodoxly Christian, which doesn't mean they're not to follow the Christ and his spirit of loving understanding. Okay. That the Vatican cease its political scheming. It has a third-rate personality, remember? Its exploitation of the masses and its emphasis upon ignorance is as important. That the manifold divisions of the Protestant churches be bridged is imperative. There's a lot of splits. As far as I know, they're not in that synthetic shape yet. If none of these things happen, and he says none, so that, he's being a little vague here because I'm sure he doesn't want to alarm us unnecessarily, but if none of these things happen, humanity is headed towards a religious war which will make the past war appear like child's play. Antagonisms and hatreds will embroil entire populations, and the politicians of all the nations will take full advantage of the situation to precipitate a war which may well prove the end of humanity. There are no hatreds so great or so deep as those fostered by religion. And let us remember, this is from Externalization 545. And let us remember that the political and economic situation is all tied in with this. So it's not religion alone, it's a number of these areas which are cooking up an unholy cocktail. Now, this is the section that continues. The Christ, therefore, has to add to all the many objectives which occupy his attention still another, the effort to avert a final war. The effort to avert a final war. This incipient war, look at the word incipient. He could see at that time. This was written in the late 40s, okay? This incipient war is contrary to the will to good of the Lord of the world and any world plan. It can be averted by goodwill, which is what we've all been saying, bringing in the love and the wisdom and the art and the beauty, and it can be averted by goodwill, which is why he placed so much emphasis upon world goodwill. And of course, it has taken root in so many of the groups, and we've been told marvelous stories of people awakening all over the world. But okay, I don't want us to stick our head in the ground either, like an ostrich. We've got to really take to heart what he's talking about here. It can be averted by goodwill. This is the most important statement in this message as far as humanity is concerned. All right, so that's one quote I want us to have in mind, Externalization of the Hierarchy, 545 and 546. All right, here's a statement about the Christ. The leader of the conflict against evil in high places is the Christ, the head of the hierarchy. What is the attitude of the Christ at this time? And this was also written in the 40s. In all reverence, and as one of his humblest friends and personal co-workers, there's an occult hint there about friends of the Christ, DK says, I am permitted to tell you a little of his position as he nears the great event in May of this year. He knows himself to be the inner spiritual commander of the armies of the Lord. He knows himself to be the inner spiritual commander of the armies of the Lord. His is the responsibility of awakening the souls of men to their presented opportunity and to the need of bringing to an end this ancient conflict between the lords of evil and the messengers of light. Of course, half the world, 90% of the world doesn't even believe in the so-called lords of evil, but they're there, and we just would have to be in total denial, knowing what we know and having studied what we have studied, to ignore this. His has been the problem, the Christ, of teaching humanity that in order to demonstrate true love and to provide scope and opportunity for a civilization in which love, brotherhood, and right relations are the governing factors, those essential steps must be taken which will accomplish this, and we must do this. Okay, to have in mind then, the inner spiritual commander of the armies of the Lord, and this he still is, and the war is still internally raging. You know how everything has three phases, right? We've had the First World War, we've had the Second World War, and now we have the final phase of it, hopefully on the subjective level. Please forgive me for being direct about this and very unpleasant and possibly a little bit, they say of us fourth-rate types that we can be pessimistic. I'm not pessimistic. I want to be realistic about this, and it would be my hope that everyone in this room could be realistic about this as well when considering what happens from the occult point of view. All right, then DK has another quote. This is from 1940. Short one. Our period is simply one in which human selfishness has come to its climax, and must either destroy humanity or be brought intelligently to an end. Okay, that was World War II, and, well, the forces of light prevailed, but not entirely. As we know, the door of evil was left ajar. And he actually, through Assagioli, Roberto Assagioli, who intuited this, he says, well, the whole Zionist movement was the continuance of the same forces that overshadowed, literally shadowed, the forces that overshadowed the Nazis. So, it's hard to realize that this may be the case, but we have to study this thing very carefully. The door where evil dwells has been left ajar. And institutionalized selfishness has now taken the place of individual selfishness. And that's happening all the time. People were talking about a certain corporate mentality which doesn't care about the fate of the world or the fate of 90% of the people in the world, and is simply institutionalized greed, and that is adding to the poverty which does not allow people to grow into the love which is everywhere present. All right, now here's another stiff requirement. I'm haunted by these things, I must say. I know how much beauty there is in the world. When I listened to that talk last night, and fantastic, James, and other things that have been said by so many people, you get inspired because you know the beauty that is occurring and how ordinary people who don't exist are waking up and insisting on, their freedom, their rights, and all the rest of it. It's happening, but we're in the balances now. We truly are in the balances, and okay, DK assured Foster Bailey there would be no atomic war. We are told this in that book, Running God's Plan, or one of those books that Foster Bailey wrote, 1954. DK assured him there would be no atomic war. Well, maybe there will be no atomic war, but there are other things being said here, and we have to be on the alert. Alert. It's an emergency, okay? So DK says this: for two complete, and this is just the way set. This is 1944. The war is coming to an end. For two complete generations, there must be a peace which will be unbroken. Now that's 50 years, is it? That's until 1994. Two complete generations. There must be a peace which will be unbroken, because behind it and protecting it will stand the armies of the Lord. At the close of that time, if the educational work done has been adequate, sane, wise, and sound, then these armies can rest from their labor and the sword be turned into the plowshare. 1994, no, it hasn't happened, okay? If this program of supervision, education, and spiritual direction is not enforced, and he's talking here about the millions spent on armaments being turned into education, if this program of supervision, education, and spiritual direction is not thus enforced, the war that would then take place would wipe out humanity, as happened once before in human history. He gets more and more intense as he goes on, okay? Well, we might as well face it, really. We might as well face this issue. Well, it's always written so long ago, he didn't mean what he said. Or Alice Bailey wrote it. I don't know. 1944, things have changed. Yes, things have changed, but the Black Lives has not changed. And their methods are various and cunning. And they work through different triangles and different groups. And, all right, we're not supposed to be preoccupying our mind with them, because it's better to substitute rather than to fight against in many respects. But both are necessary, as I will show. Here comes DK with another statement from that same May 1944, and he's talking about the parable that Jesus gave us, or was it the Christ at that time? I would here refer you to a parable spoken in terms of far-sighted vision and warning by the Christ centuries ago, anent the man who cleaned house, casting out the devils. When it was all swept and garnished, it remained empty, as symbol of unused opportunity and ignored responsibility. And then, as the Lord of Light put it, the last state of that man was worse than the first. The sweeping and cleansing has been going on for 5 long years. He's in the middle of the war here. The final stages of this destroying, but cleansing process are now being taken. And then he says, then, my brothers, what? Then, my brothers, what? The tremendous impulse of the United Nations was begun. It was a beacon for the world. Of course, DK said right away, big mistakes were made. The whole, he was against the creation of the State of Israel. I'm a Jew. Okay, I don't know if I'm against or not against, but, he was against it. And he was against admitting Russia a totalitarian power. He said big mistakes have been made. Obviously, it was compromised. Okay, but it's great. But, where is it now? Then my brothers what? We're still in the then my brothers what stage. We're still in that. All right, and now I will read the last bit that once Brett Mitchell alerted me to long ago in the opening first edition of Problems of Humanity. I had been blissfully ignorant of this particular introduction to that book. But now I wake up with it every morning. Okay, he's talking about the problems of humanity. There are necessarily many problems, many lesser problems, but these cover the major ones with which humanity is at this time confronted. What are they? The psychological rehabilitation of the nation, problem of the churches, racial minorities, capital and labor, capital and labor, yeah. And something about the nations at the end of it all. What was it? The child problem, the children, the education problem, anything else I'm leaving out. There were 6 problems there, right? So those are the ones he wanted us to concentrate on, and now we have this whole incredible ecological sustainability issue, which is related, of course, to capital and labor. They're all interrelated, absolutely. In the Morya Federation, we study all these things closely, hoping to produce servers who really are going to take a hold of a particular seed group area. Okay, here we go. But these many lesser problems, but these cover the major ones with which humanity is at this time confronted and which must find some solution during the next 25 years. Well, when is that? 1970, 1972, 3, 4, 5, something like that? Okay. If no progress is made on these problems, and these problems remain unsolved, and of course progress has been made. Of course it has. In many areas it has been made. Not that the churches have begun to clean house, the sharing, that's a tough one. Not so good, but some. And then the whole question of peace. There has to be a relative measure of peace reached. Well, what's that relative measure? We certainly have not had 2 generations of uninterrupted peace, have we? So anyway, if no progress is made and these problems remain unsolved, at least in some measure, he gives us the slack, okay? And if humanity slips back into the status existing prior to the war, which it has not really done, okay, then nothing can stop the next war. If it comes, it will bring the final death blow to the human race. This is a master talking with prevision. Master DK, that nice second-rate master, okay? If it comes, it will bring the final death blow to the human race. Mankind, as we know it, could not survive, nor would it be right and good that it should. And that's the one that just knocks you over. Nor would it be right and good that it should. The death of a race might then be decreed, and a long process of nurturing a race of men who would finally express divinity would have to be started all over again. These are not idle words, but the foundation of a possibility which can be clearly visioned. Now, I don't know where we can get this. Maybe some of you had the first edition of Problems of Humanity. That's where Brett told me it was, if I'm correct. And that was an awakener for me, let me tell you, when I read these words. Okay, so, those are the sobering, alarming words about the emergency in which we now stand, because the forces that would like to see this happen are still very active, although beautiful things and powerful things are happening all over the world. So I say we are in the balances. So when we know something about the absolute divinity of the essential human nature, perhaps it's really hard to hear such thoughts. We just want to dismiss them. We don't want to give room in our consciousness for such gloomy, challenging, alarming, terrifying, appalling thoughts. It's hard to realize how much our fate is in our hands. It really is. Daddy and mommy aren't necessarily going to take care of us all the time. Atlantis did go down, you know. And by the will of the Lord of the world, it went down. And the next war would invoke Shambhala in the Department of Religion. Do we see any signs? So, you know, it's tough for us to realize that humanity has gone down before. And it's not a foregone conclusion that in spite of ourselves, we will be saved. I want to emphasize that element of salvation, because I'm really going to hit upon that in a few minutes. So much is at stake, and emergency measures are required now. If DK during the war said it couldn't be business as usual, and there's no time in the life of the disciple for the ordinary kind of social, pleasurable, time-wasting, candy-eating things, then now is the same way, with even more dire consequences now. So, you know, I'll invoke this in a moment. DK is one small master of the wisdom, you know, totally brilliant and capacious in his understanding of the planet and more. He has one small prophetic voice, and his prophecies, even among his own, are not realized, not taken to heart, not heeded. Dismissed. That was a long time ago. We're beyond those books. Now we have something else. They've been outlived. I don't consider 2% assimilation outliving. So the final war that Christ is trying to avert, and by the way, I think he will succeed. Okay, I really think he will succeed. But maybe not without our help, okay? In our own little way. So it's a dreadful thing to contemplate. The need to begin the human experiment all over again is shocking, sobering. We've been at it 18 million years, or, well, 21 million years, most of which we've forgotten, but it hasn't been fast. And there's been plenty of pain along the way. And they want a race that can really produce something. A spiritual race, spiritual civilization. If cosmic failures are possible and galaxies collide, then planetary failures are certainly possible, and we've already had a big one back there on the moon chain. That DK talks about this, and perhaps some of us, raise your hand, were there, you know, participating in that failure. It's all deep in the subconscious mind, you know. One day when the big movie is shown, you'll see how it all worked out. I think, you know, that movie with Kirk Douglas called Illusion, anybody see that? It's all about the karmic records. You know, you get stuck there in the movie house all by yourself, and the guy with the cans of film up there is running the Akashic records for you. So we all get to see where we've been and what we've done right and amiss. But if that moonchain failure was possible, then, you know, what he says here is also possible. But from our little personality timescale, all of this looks quite horrible. You know, how many lives have we had? How many thousands of lives have we had? Do we want to do this all over again? But the great Lord is doing all he can, and we don't know his methods whatsoever. But we can be sure they're the most potent possible on this planet to avert the final war. And this is what a Savior really does. So great is his compassion. You know, he loves everybody. I was struck last night, of course, no ordinary human being. No ordinary human being. Everybody a gift of the Spirit. Everybody equally divine. Equally on the level, you know, not, there has a hierarchy, you know, we're not all manifesting at the same level, but we are equally divine on the monadic level. So, this is not about saving a, you know, I'm going to be saved, you're going to be saved. This is about the whole human race, okay? Without which personal salvation is pretty meaningless. So I'm deeply arrested, stunned by the thought that the Christ is trying to do this. It makes me ponder. He really is the Savior, you know. He's taking aim at the essence, the survival of our present humanity, our survival. Well, you know, there's so much good and so much beauty in humanity. It's, you know, when you're under the influence of love, you do that. You You forgive your enemies. They aren't your enemies. They're you. You do those things that everybody thinks you would be insane to do when they're not under the influence of love. So there's so much good in humanity, so much progress now among so many people, and we've had a festival of beautiful revelations here about the progress that we are making. We are so essentially divine that some might think, well, it just couldn't be as bad as some of these words indicate it could be. But behind the scenes, the battle rages, and the potential for good and bad had perhaps never been more sharply focused. This is the decisive point. The whole creation groaneth and travaileth, waiting for the coming of the sons of men, the sons of God. So the hierarchy saw this back in those days. They saw this choice point at which we all find ourselves. We're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. It's a real crisis. So, the 4 freedoms were mentioned. I think we should review those because the 4 freedoms are under assault now. The great disciple Franklin Roosevelt came out with these, and he said it was as much of the real plan as humanity could assimilate at that time and maybe even now. So let's just review these freedoms. And this is Roosevelt speaking, because I think it's up to people like us to defend these freedoms wherever they are threatened, even if within our own psyche. Because you can be sure that whatever's going on out there is happening in here too. In future days, he says, which we seek to make secure, we look forward to a world founded upon 4 essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world, under threat. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world, under threat. The third is freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy, peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. Well, we've had ongoing abysmal poverty and lack of opportunity time immemorial, and certainly following the Second World War, a lot of this could be cleaned up, and it wasn't. So I wouldn't say under threat, it's just been with us. The fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into human terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in any position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. Well, one fraction of the U.S. arsenal and other arsenals from other nuclear countries could destroy everything we built. So that has not been done. And these freedoms now are particularly under threat, and you know why? Because truly, and I hate to say it, but I must say it, the Black Lodge is on the attack again. Not just in a general, horrible way, trying to undermine all of human progress, but in a concerted manner. And that's where we come in. That's where we come in. Because we cannot stand idly by, knowing what we know, being able to do what we can do, and not play our part in deflecting some of this attack. I know, look, I'm an Aries type. I've got Ray 4. War is a constant state in my mind, but I have to bring it to you and share it with you. It's my obligation. So, what can we do? Now, all of you have your own ideas about what we can do, and I'm sure they're very good. Maybe they're a lot better than what I'm going to offer. But we need a potent occult meditation program to protect the 4 freedoms, which are freedoms which hierarchy would see established within humanity to protect it from the incursions of the counterforce. Now, we do have good meditations. There are some of us who are doing this Rule 10 about rending the veils of Maya, found in the raised and initiations, a very potent first way meditation, and there's a number of people who are doing that on a weekly basis. That's good. That's a start. That's needed. We need more. One of the great problems of the great majority of intelligent and cultured people is that they consider it naivete or religious credulity to believe in the existence of a counterforce. It's like the old days. They actually believed that people were possessed. They actually believed that there were demons and all that. But now we are enlightened, and we know that no such things exist. Well, that may be very comfortable for the rational modern mind, but it's not true. Those things do exist. It's such an uncomfortable thought. We want to think that all is well and will inevitably end well, and I believe it will inevitably end well. But we are passing now through the period when in the book of Revelation they call it the tribulation, and we're passing through that now for the next 14 years. We are in the balances. Everything we decide now about how to spend our time, our resources, our powers of thought and action can, in their aggregate, be decisive for the success or failure of the present humanity. We are terribly responsible. And in this era, when Saturn is in Libra, emphasizing choice, the choice of the individual, the group, and the nations, this type of responsibility had better come home to us now. We're going into 2012. I hope in next year's conference, and I anticipate that there will be a conference next year on the 5th ray, that we are able to blow away some of the illusions about 2012 and to affirm what is the reality of the situation using the illumined 5th ray scientific mind to do so. I would like to see illusion conquered, wouldn't you? It may take a little more than a year. All right. So what we decide is of the utmost importance. Now, there's one more dismal quote here I want to share with you. It's about Capricorn and Taurus. It's from Esoteric Astrology, page 542 and 543. And this is a little mild compared to what he did say. Capricorn is related, as I've told you, to initiation. It's the sign of the coming world's savior, and these higher aspects of the Capricornian influence can be potently demonstrated if humanity so wills it and will take advantage of the Venusian influence to use the mind as the reflector of soul purpose. We all want to do that, right? Venus is highly placed in Capricorn, and it represents the transfigured human personality, the solar angel and exaltation, and we can participate in the coming of the Christ in this way. So far, so good. If this does not take place, and that's decay for you. Here's what you can do, and if you don't, this is it, okay? If this does not take place, the present situation will turn into something far worse, a situation wherein the mass of men will be reinitiated into the earth and forced to turn their backs upon the dawning light. A dark period of civilization will ensue. Instead of the dark cave of initiation, wherein the light of the initiate's own nature illumines the darkness, and so demonstrates his command of light, the dark cave of materialism and of physical animal control will take the place of the lighted way. The earthly aspect of Capricorn, earthly, the lowest concrete aspect of the mind, and an increased control by the Taurian spirit in its worst form, will take the place of the divine possibility of entrance into greater light, the manifestation of the soul nature, and the recognition of the light which is found in the eye of the bull. Reinitiated into earth. There's a very strong materialistic movement growing to counter all the marvelous things the people of our nature and the new group of world servers are exhibiting. The two types of magicians are emerging. The white magicians, and he tells they will be countered by the Marasic magicians, he calls them. This is way forward too, you understand? This is before we get to the harmony. This is the conflict which leads us to the harmony. We can't ignore it. It's the total yin-yang. It's spirit and matter. We have to see both. When faced with such thoughts, we can act in a number of ways. Here is my opinion about what not to do, ignore these words. Don't ignore the Tibetans' words, sweeping them under the rug, getting on with our relatively pleasant life in an affluent country where we have most of what we need, and our comfort zones are not especially challenged. And we don't want to entertain thoughts which run counter to hope and optimism and, esoteric anticipation. This has painted for us a marvelous picture of our possibilities. We want to hold those in our mind, and we want to go right towards them when 90% of the world doesn't have the slightest idea of what we're talking about. I shouldn't say 90%, I should say 99. So this is what I would like to see not happen, ignoring his words. Now here's what I would like to see happen. It all derives from the following. The salvation of humanity must become our foremost priority. And I don't just loosely say the service of humanity, the kindness, the helpfulness, and all those beautiful things which are absolutely necessary. I say the salvation of humanity must become our foremost priority. You see why I didn't sleep much last night. These thoughts were really impressing themselves upon me. I was very disturbed about this talk for many reasons. But okay, whatever came in, and I'm sharing that with you. So let us, here's what we must do. We must deeply examine our own motivation to discover the extent to which we actually do love humanity, or the degree to which the love of humanity is not an immediate issue for us because we like people. The love of humanity, the will to love, the fire of love that he wants to burn us all up in, burn us up in the fire of the will to love, or even better, love better than the will to love. Okay, that's what I think must happen. I also think this must happen. To take stock of what we are willing to sacrifice in the attempt to help the Christ as he attempts to avert a final war. Because we've danced around the concept of sacrifice until it almost means something pleasant, And we know that for the soul and spirit there is no sacrifice in the usual sense, and it does mean to make sacred, but it also means that Sanat Kumara or many of the masters could be doing other things in which they perhaps were very interested, but they're not. They're standing at their post, not leaving under Saturn, doing what must be done in a confined space and area because it needs to be done. They are sacrificing in the more conventional sense. They're choosing to do what they must do out of love rather than what they might like to do as they expand their cosmic consciousness. So, here's what I propose. That we create an esoteric front line of defense to protect against all that seeks to weaken the spiritual and moral fiber of humanity. I do not think we should wait until the next great disaster occurs, either to humanity as a whole or in our nations, and we can be sure it will, before we enter preemptively into this work. Preemptive esoteric defense. There is a plan, after all, and the plan must be protected. Not only expressed, but protected. Now, there are first-ray types, there are second-ray types. That's the two main lines, right? And they work in different ways. This is a call to some first-ray activity. We are subject to many tests. Christ condemned the sin and not the sinner. We are to find the good in all people, and there's so much good in every... What's that old saying? there's so much good in the worst of us and so much bad in the best of us that it behooves all of us to make the most. It behooves all of us to make the most of all of us. I'm messing up just a little bit, but that's the idea. Make the best of us, okay. But while we're being kind and loving and appreciative and all the rest, we have to hold firm, taking a stance when we see that which is inimical to the plan. It must not be allowed to advance. You know, the Lord of the Rings books and the movies were fantastic for the human psyche, as we know. And there was the time when the magician, I want to call him Vainamoinen because he's taken from a Finnish figure, but he's Gandalf, right? And the Balrog was after everybody, right? The Balrog was not a very pleasant thing. And he pounded his staff, and he said, "You shall not pass." Did he not? That's a tremendous assertion. Now, that's first ray in action. And we're going to have to do that, holding firm against that which is inimical to the divine plan and which threatens the four freedoms. So, an esoteric guardian wall must be created by disciples to reinforce the great guardian wall which hierarchy has created, expulsive of evil, protecting the good. And here's what he says about that guardian wall. The hierarchy stands at the midway point, standing like a wall of steel, unshatterable and immovable between humanity and the forces of evil. Now, DK knows that the forces of evil are brothers just like he is. He says an erring brother in the land of distances, whatever. Still, a wall of unshatterable steel does exist. And despite the fact that they know the members of the counterforce are divine too, though brothers who have wandered far into the land of distances, as he says. Now my time is just about up. Probably is up. There are many ways to create a guardian wall without building a theosophical shell around you. You know what I mean? He says that's not valid. But he calls it the wheel of living fire that burns not but ever heals. And he gives it to Roberto Assagioli, and he gives the 7-ray streams of divine love coming out of the wheel of living fire. And think what we could do with that with groups and humanity too. These 7 great emanations. Here's how he says you should do it. Ernest, many blessings, and thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful to see you again. He says, see before you a wheel of fire with 7 spokes. See it immediately before your eyes. Then by an act of the creative imagination, see yourself, the group, humanity, whatever, standing in the center of the hub of the wheel. There regard yourself as if you were that hub. From that central position, send out the 7 streams of living love, radiating upon the world. When you do this, you serve, and are at the same time completely protected. This exercise can become instantaneous and effective. It generates a protective force, and at the same time makes you a living center of light and love. So now I'm going to end with a proposal. I say there is a touchstone. I'll give you the touchstone that I want to make the touchstone for me for the rest of my life. Is what I think, feel, and do contributing directly to the salvation of humanity, or is it not? And I mean it's salvation of humanity. I don't mean being nice, being kind, having a field of service. I mean salvation of humanity. When I say a thing, do a thing, think a thing, feel a thing, is it contributing directly to the salvation of humanity? The skeptics will say, who do you think you are? I mean, your arrogance, that you can make any difference, whatever. To this I would counter, who are you not to take upon yourself, you, the immortal, birthless, deathless spirit, the burden of the most essential? We have that opportunity now. And the last thing I want to say is I want to see a subjective group formed. And this is a very assertive inner group. And it will require great sacrifice. And it will be dangerous, inwardly. And it will have to have constant attention. And once you commit, knowing what it is, you should persist. I would like to see an Esoteric Defense League created. An inner group of warriors standing firm, working with the inner warrior, committed to apply all occult powers, disciplines, achievements to the assertive protection of humanity as part of a guardian wall which can augment somewhat the great guardian wall that the hierarchy has erected between us and the forces of evil. Now, meanwhile, all the other beautiful things have to happen. All the awakening of the human heart, all the communication, all the commonality, all the sharing of love along the many Geminian lines and uniting in Aquarius all the beautiful Jupiterian things. And this first-rate work has to be done. And whether this is the final name for it, but it's the name that hit me, the Esoteric Defense League. Obviously, I do have Cancer rising. I'm interested in defense. Of course I am. But this is needed. And powerful internal occult first-ray methods are here required. And you could get yourself into trouble if you get into this. So you'll have to think carefully. I intend to do this now. It's finally climaxed for me. I've had all these feints, like jabs of a sword. But finally, I'm going to do this. And I seek companions in this tough work. We will use DK's powerful rending the veils meditation, and we will use other methods. And they will be occult methods, and we will be persistent. Because we have to do our part to protect humanity, fighting fire with fire, protecting the four freedoms, and showing our gratitude for what we have been given, which is immense. I've used my time, but I've shared with you now the deliberations of most of the night, and come and see me if you're interested. Meanwhile, we will have a beautiful service dedicated to the Christ energy, which of course is the great power as love conquers all. So I've instructed you about who to follow and how to follow, about meeting you at 10 minutes after 10, about going through the labyrinth, about the people that I want to see here. And now I think there's a little time at the bookstore and a couple of announcements. Thank you for your attention.